still good.
Probably coming for a long time, and many of you are more recently coming. Is there anyone coming for the first time? Anyone coming for the first time to the temple here? First time here? Anyone coming for the first time? Thank you. Welcome. And as I'm a visitor here, I don't particularly know if everyone's regular or, what your involvement is, so to speak, in the practice of Krishna consciousness. We just heard you chant the Hare Krishna mantra very nicely on the beads, and that was very inspiring for me to hear you all chanting. I've been coming to Sydney now since 1988, on and off, sometimes more regular than others. And a few faces are familiar, but not many since those early days. Hare Krishna. So we're going to have a little discourse now on Bhagavad Gita, and perhaps you're familiar or not, I don't know. Is there any way that we can have Jai Radha Madhava accessible to everyone?
Yes,
it doesn't come on a mic on a projector screen or anything. I don't know. Who knows, and who doesn't know, I don't know. Maybe they're not familiar with this song. Jai Radha Madhava is a very simple little bhajan which we usually sing before discourses. And it's a beautiful description. By hearing descriptions of the spiritual world, the effect on our consciousness, just like we've been chanting Hare Krishna, this mantra is said to be a spiritual sound vibration. Golokara Prema Dana Harinama Sankirtanam. It's come from the spiritual realm. It's not a material sound. It's not made by man. It's an eternal sound vibration in the spiritual realm, which basically is just the sound representative of the spiritual pastimes of the Lord. And same with this particular song, which we'll try to sing, Jai Radha Madhava, which describes the beautiful pastimes. In this world, we're all very personal. We like to be personal, at least. We all have our pastimes. We all have our fun. We all have our relationships. We may be into many different things which attract our hearts. It's natural. Everyone's looking for happiness. Everyone's looking for love. Everyone's looking for relationships. It gets frustrating sometimes. We kind of try to cut off, but actually that's what we're looking for. It's only because of the material frustration that we become, or failure to fulfill our desire, that we sometimes become depressed, or we take to an impersonal lifestyle or something. But actually we're very personal. That's why we have families, friends, lovers, brothers, sisters, and so on. So that's there in the spiritual realm, but on a spiritual platform. And this song tells us a little bit about it, how Krishna is the greatest lover. I mean, in this world, love has its unavoidable presence because it's eternal in its nature. In this world, it's just reflected through the temporary energies. So our love in this world is not unconditional, it's not completely pure. It's mixed with personal motivations and shortcomings and time also. In the spiritual world, there's no limits to love. And Krishna, the object of love, is unlimited, so there's no limit in terms of how many lovers there can be. It's unlimited. And this describes a few of his intimate pastimes of relating with his consort Srimati Radharani and the others who are in that mood. Any living entity can worship God. This is a unique thing, thanks Paul. A very unique thing which is almost unknown to people in general. Most people, if they believe in God, they think of God as the supreme controller or the creator. It's true, but it's not very personal. If you ask somebody, or if somebody asks you, tell me about your husband, and you say, well, he's a great controller, he's a he's got 5 cars and a lot of property. It's maybe true, but it's not very personal. And the same with God. Most people's idea of God is the great, very great. He's all-pervading or something or another, but not very personal. And if you have a relationship with Him, it's generally understood it's either a relationship, an impersonal relationship with no real interaction, or it's a relationship with servant. We're all His servants. Not everybody likes the idea of being a servant. And in one sense, Krishna also accepts whatever our mood is, but at the same time, let's give an example. In your own home, many of you have children. You're living in a home with a wife, husband, children, and so on. Which is more pleasing or more satisfying? Your relationship with your wife and children, hopefully it's good, or your work, your relationship at work. They're both important. But which is more pleasing? Which is more dear to the heart? Your family or the situation at work? Pardon? Some say family. Maybe some would disagree. I don't know. But generally it's the family. It's much more intimate, isn't it? You're having to protect your children. You're having to reciprocate lovingly with your wife. You have different roles, but you're kind of equal in partnership. And with your mother and father, isn't it? You're the father of your children. My brother always used to say that was his greatest pleasure in family life, was his being a father to 4 sons. And you get pleasure out of that, even if other things are not going well. If the family situation is stable and pleasing, you're happy. But if work's going well and your family's a mess, it's not good. You can't get anything much out of work either. So that's the more intimate thing to us, and most people are not aware of that, but God is a person too. He gets more pleasure, much more pleasure from devotees serving Him as in a parental relationship. We can't imitate this, by the way. This is transcendental. Right now, we're still very much materialistically inclined. But when one is pure in heart, one's actually realized one's relationship with God or with Krishna. One can have a relationship with God as a lover, believe it or not. That's almost inconceivable. But why? Because Krishna enjoys that more. And that's the whole idea, God is not just the creator, the controller, Lord of everything, but He's the supreme lover. Love is something which is, what can you say? You can't reduce it to a formula. It's something which is there. You can't say why. It's the nature of the soul. It's the nature of the soul. Everything has its nature, constitutional nature, and love is the constitution of every soul. But we're not fulfilling it in this world. Everything has its, even mundane material things have constitution. Stone is hard, water is liquid, sugar is sweet, chili powder is pungent. Everything has its characteristics. It's lakshana. Lakshana means characteristics. And our lakshanas right now, or our characteristics in this world, are reflected, so they're not completely manifesting. The full swarup, or the eternal characteristic of everyone, is love for God. Because of lack of understanding, because of various misconceptions, most people are away from that. They don't take it. But this is the highest form of love, which we're all searching for. Love for God. So we're going to sing this song, which describes some of Krishna's pastimes, and maybe it's available to some of you. I don't know. Some of you know it. Jai Radha Madhava. All glories to that form of the Lord, the lover of Radharani, and who's engaged in absolutely unlimited expansions, devotees in loving exchanges, and wants to share it with all of us. We all have the right to enter into that space or that plane of existence, spiritual world. Good. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Follow the cartels. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balalabha Giridhari. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Just follow the cartels. Gopi Janaballabha Giribadadhari. Yasodhanandana Raja Janaranjana Yasodhanandana Raja Janaranjana Yasodhanandana Raja Janaranjana Yasodhanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Panachari Yamuna Tira Panachari Tira Panachari Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki jai, Gaunitai ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Haribo. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namani, Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Vichardine, Nirvasesha Sanyavari Pastacharde Shatani. Om Jnana Timrandasya Nananjana Shlakaya Chakshurmitam Yena Tasme Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Shvayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Shvapadantikam. Hare Krishna. Most of you are probably familiar with the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe some of you are new to this movement, have not familiarized yourself, but this is the foundational book of Siddhanta on Krishna consciousness, the practical application of the basic philosophy in our daily lives. It's a guidebook to help us to live our lives in a way, if we want to understand more about spiritual life, especially if we want self-realization or God-realization. It's a foundational guidebook to help us to mold our lives a little bit favorably in that direction as well. And ultimately to understand how to reach the final goal of life, the highest conclusion or the goal of life, to be in full consciousness of our spiritual natures and our relationship with God, and to have a relationship with Krishna in that way. If we want a relationship in this world, we also make some endeavor to find out how to establish it, how to sustain it, how to improve it, and so on. It's not automatic in the sense of attraction will be there, but to maintain that in a way which will be effective, we usually have to make some effort. So if we want to understand, it's not like say, well, if God exists, then why can't I see him? Will you show me? Even ordinary things, or many things we can't see, one has to have the eligibility, the particular set of senses or the intellect to be able to perceive, or some instrument like a telescope, microscope, whatever, to perceive that which is beyond their normal sense perception. So although everything is related and one can experience the presence of a supreme being, no doubt, in the material energy, to actually, many times say, where's God? I really want to see him. George Harrison used to sing, my sweet Lord, oh my Lord, I really want to be with you. I really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long. Different things. Nice sentiment. Yes, it may take a long time, it may take a second. It depends on our consciousness. As long as we're looking for material enjoyments, as long as we're seeing ourselves in the center, then our understanding of the Supreme Being is very limited, if at all, and is generally only theoretical, mixed with some faith. But the realization of God is another thing. So I'm going to read some verses from chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is literally means the song of the Supreme. He's singing to us. He's singing to us, just like you may sing to your child to put them to sleep, or whatever, to entertain them or to educate them sometimes. So he's singing the spiritual message to all of us. And it's up to us whether we want to hear it or not. That's our choice. Nobody's forced. I don't believe that's up to you. Then we believe in our material perception. It's up to us. We can easily see the result of material perception. It doesn't lead to anything more than death. So we're going to start at the very beginning of this chapter, in the very 4th chapter, if you want to follow me. 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We're just going to pinpoint a few verses in this chapter, so we get a thread of where we're going here. Up to now, the first chapter is setting the scene, and in other words, we're in the scene, we're in this material world, we're often perplexed what to do, we're often disturbed, we're confused, we're whatever else it may be about what's happening around here. We're certainly disturbed by certain things that are happening, and we're looking for answers. And it's quite frustrating when you can't get an answer which is meaningful, satisfying, and so on. So it come to the point where Arjuna basically gave up. He didn't really confused. He didn't know whether to go ahead. He was supposed to fight. He didn't want to. Most people probably wouldn't. And he was about, really almost gave up. So then he asked Krishna, so the 2nd chapter, Karpanya doshopa tasvabhava, Pachitamitam dharma samudacheta, that he accepted Krishna, please tell me what I'm supposed to do. This is a significant verse. And from then Krishna began to explain jnana, karma and action, Krishna consciousness, Buddha yoga, different types of yogas, up to the point of really trying to understand what action is, what inaction is, and so many things. To Arjuna, and how one can actually act in this world without, let's say, being controlled by the world around us. Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Bol, Hare Krishna. And the next chapter, chapter 3, he goes on. In the beginning of chapter 2, first thing he explains is Jnana Yoga, so he expands on that a little bit in the second chapter. And then he explains Karma Yoga, and in Karma Yoga, in the third chapter, he goes into great depth of detail. It's important to follow one's karma, but with yoga, connection with God, not just because that's the way we are. But whatever we are, we try to see how that is, so to speak, can be engaged in relationship with Krishna. Karma Yoga. Yoga means to connect with God. Our work, our nature, our facilities, how to connect that with God in a way which is favorable. So the fourth chapter is called Divya Gyan, transcendental knowledge. So taking that together, jnana and karma together, now we're going to see how that can become transcendental. And there's a science, and this Bhagavad Gita is that practical science. Of course, it's the first step. First step, practically speaking, in serious practice of spiritual life. There are many more. And in the very beginning of this fourth chapter, Krishna explains an essential factor. It's not a man-made thing. This knowledge is eternal. The knowledge of the soul is eternal. Knowledge of the soul is eternal. God is eternal. Knowledge of God is eternal. All the energies are eternal. Knowledge of those energies is eternal. And that eternal knowledge, in the material world, our knowledge is called phenomenal, it's temporary. It's related to changing phenomena around us. Noumenal knowledge is not. It's eternal knowledge. It's unending. It's unlimited, you could say. But it's ever existing. It's not let's say, varying. It's not a theory. It's a fact. So this is how it's heard. In the first verse, Krishna says, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god. Oh, come on. Immediately say, what is he talking about? The sun god? Is this some mythology from Greece or something? What is all this about? We're so conditioned to our idea of life, of possibilities. Science is based on nothing but theoretical possibilities. There's no absolute fact behind things. Theories. Yet we disclaim or we cast aside any so-called, whatever you want to call it, anything on the spiritual line, but Greek mythology, Indian mythology, this, that, the other, scientific mythology, we could say, is a myth. It's not absolute. What we call science is ever evolving. So this particular science pertaining to the soul is eternal. And everywhere in the universe, it's not that we're so great. This is the only planet on the earth with living entities and the universe. Sometimes the scientist indicates it's possible that there may be life on other planets. They say things like that. It's possible that there may be. They have no idea. They have no means of telling either, because they only think of life. It's called Atmavan Manyate Jagat. We only see everything in relation to our own selves. We think life has to be like what we experience it. We don't know what life is. This is just a lump of flesh which we think is life. Life is not a lump of flesh or a brain or even a flickering mind. It's way beyond that. But they don't know that. And life is not dependent on a lump of flesh like we have in this earth planet. It doesn't depend on that. The spirit soul can live in fire, can live in water, can live in ether, anywhere. It depends on the nature of the soul, or particular karmic karmas and so on. So there's no, even if other planets are devoid of the so-called vegetation, etc., of this planet, it doesn't exclude the fact that the soul can exist there. They say, I don't know if it's proven, but they say that they've discovered there actually are living organs in fire. Just repeating what I've heard. I have no means of justifying it, and it doesn't worry me two hoots if it isn't justified. But nonetheless, it is a fact that the soul can live in fire. We can't imagine living in the sun. The sun, just like this earth, we don't really know what's inside it. We have some ideas. But the earth is also a body, earth body, and is also a conscious living entity within the earth, just like our body. If you happen to be a germ, you cannot conceive of a living entity having a body like ours. You can't conceive of it. You may be living in or on this body, but you have no idea that there's one soul who's like the master soul of the whole body. You can't believe, it's impossible to conceive. So similarly, we're like germs. We're all like germs in their own way. We can't conceive of such a situation of a living entity being able. I mean, if you have no idea, you wouldn't be able to conceive of a living entity being able to live in the depths of the ocean, but they can. They have a suitable body for living in the ocean or in the air, underground, and so on. Similarly, on other planets, living entities have fiery bodies. They don't have earthy bodies or watery ones. They have fiery ones. You can't see it because we don't have the vision to see or to distinguish the features of those who have fiery bodies. We can only see within a certain, very limited range. So materially we can hardly see. So what to speak of spiritually? Takshri Krishna Namadina Bhavad Gwayam Indra, with these material senses that we have, it is impossible to see the spiritual soul with these senses. But there's a method of that realization, a purificatory method of our consciousness by which we can realize the spiritual nature. So that knowledge, that science, has been passed down. I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. What we're getting here is mentioned in the next verse, in number 2. The supreme science, or this supreme science, was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession. This is the point. We'll argue over these details of how is that possible, but the principle is what counts. That this knowledge is not man-made, it's not something that evolved in history, it's eternal. And it's been passed down through time immemorial, through a line of disciplic. Maybe that word's not common to you. Disciple, spiritual master instructs disciple, and disciple becomes, if he becomes eligible, then instructs his disciple, and it goes down through time immemorial. Like that. It's called parampara, or in English, disciplic succession. Evam parampara praptam. And the saintly kings, it was instructed many amongst the kings, particularly because they had to organize society. They had to, facilitate everyone in society, serve them. And it was understood in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science appears to be lost. So then again, Krishna says that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend. He's telling it to Arjuna. He's re-establishing this line. Therefore you can understand the transcendental mystery because you're a devotee. Cannot be at the end of the Gita, Krishna says this cannot be explained to or understood by those who are not engaged in devotional service, or those who are envious. They cannot understand. Then we move over a few verses, and one of the main things he establishes here, that you, Arjuna, are eternal, but you can't remember. You've had so many births, but you can't remember them. And Krishna says, I also appear in this world like you, but I, in text number 6, he says, I am unborn, and my transcendental body never deteriorates. Says our body deteriorates, and we're born like in a womb. God is not like that. He can appear in this world as he likes, anywhere he likes, anytime he likes, any way he likes. Otherwise he's not God. There's no meaning to God if we put limits on him. That's our own, we say, limitations that we have. We try to impose them on others. We try to see God in comparison to ourselves. It will not work. Some comparison is there, but it's not sufficient. Our body is temporary, his is eternal. spiritual. Say, how can he be that? How can that be? How can we challenge that? The very meaning of God, he's the source of everything, he's unlimited, he's inconceivable, he's all cognizant of everything. He can do anything, all the energies are his. This is the meaning, otherwise there's no meaning. He can do anything he likes. Even in our country, the king, theoretically, we don't have a king, of course, a king in England, but not quite a king. But anyway, the king normally would be able to go anywhere. He doesn't have to ask permission if he wants to go into the prison, if he wants to go into the hospital, he wants to go into school. He can just go wherever he likes. He's got the freedom to do that. We don't. We're limited. So God certainly has the freedom. Everything is his kingdom. He can go anywhere he likes. And he's the Lord of all sentient beings. But still he appears in this world in his original transcendental form, spiritual form. Is very unique. The difference between matter and spirit, well, we can say, well, we've got a material body. But it's a material body only in as much as the way we see it is actually spiritual energy. It's just covered over. Basically, it's caused by our forgetfulness of our spiritual nature and thinking this material energy is meant for my pleasure. When we understand this material energy is meant for the pleasure of God or Krishna, and we use it in that direction, then we'll understand that this is also spiritual energy. It may be changing its form, but it's nonetheless the energy is spiritual. And same with the living entity. We may have to give up this body one day, which we do, of course, but the soul continues. It doesn't die with a death. That's just the material body collapses, that's all. Just like a coat. You have a coat, and maybe the coat wears out. You don't die when a coat wears out. The body's just like a coat. You don't start crying your eyes out. Oh, the coat died. Oh. Maybe you do, but you shouldn't do. Your socks have got holes in. Oh no, my socks have got holes in. Ah. You kind of do. You try to sew them up. You send them to the knitting hospital, and you have the knitting doctor sews them up like they sew up your body when you have an operation. It's the same thing, actually. They use like knitting needles to sew you up. Similar thing. It's just a bag. Just a bag. It's the skin of a bag. Inside the bag is all kinds of things. But the soul is above that. It's just perceiving it. Just experiencing it. Experiencing it. Our body is like that. Because we identify. We think it's not really our body at all. We have a spiritual body also. But we're at the moment we're looking in the opposite direction, so we see a material body. If you're looking east, you can't see what's west, or vice versa. So we're looking in the wrong direction. We're looking at the material energy as all in all. This is just a reflection of reality. The material energy is just a temporary reflection or a shadow of reality. So he comes in this world for the very purpose to help us to see or to work towards seeing our spiritual nature. That's the meaning of, when people say, is this a religion? I say, what do you mean by religion? First thing you've got to define your terms. And they generally have a very unusual definition of religion or a misconstrued definition. Some kind of, faith, some kind of, culture that's grown up somewhere, a dogma, all kinds of unfortunate misconceptions come up. And not really understanding. Religion simply means to act in relationship with God, that's all. Of course, if you take that as a definition, everything should be a religion. Everything should be engaged in relationship with God. And there are rules, codes, and everything to help us to relate with that. Where, it's like it comes natural because of love. But in the beginning it may not be, so there are certain rules in place to help us to come towards that awakening of that pure, unending, fully satisfying love. So when those rules are not being followed, when those guidelines are not being followed, then Krishna appears accordingly in different forms. Maybe his representatives come in different ways, in different places, at different times, to help people to get back on track again. Humans are meant to be. Human life, really, without religion, is not considered human life. It's a polished form of animal life. Human life must have some degree of following the codes of God. Otherwise it's not really a human life as such. We call it human, but it's not. Our consciousness or our purpose in life is not human. It's mundane. So when those decline is there, and irreligion is becoming prominent, like today, where irreligion is very prominent in many parts of the world, if not everywhere, probably everywhere, but certainly very prominent in most places, where illicit sex is almost like the norm. People eat any damn thing they can eat. They kill babies in the womb. They slaughter animals left, right, and centre simply for sense gratification in most cases. And we take all kinds of toxics, all kinds of poison to try to get some interesting experiences. Cigarettes, and liquor, and drugs, and God knows what. Pouring in chemicals into our body, processed food and all kinds of stuff. And hardly we have any connection with nature. We dump each other left and right. We have no real understanding of each other or even of ourselves. It's a very unpleasant situation for any gentleman, so to speak. Or to speak of the victims of our ungentlemanly behaviour. Whatever it is, animals, embryos, people who are unable to stick up for themselves, elderly people, children, so much exploitation. Women, so much exploitation is there. This very degraded age. So you may say, why doesn't God appear? Well, he has appeared, but he's appeared in a different form. He's appeared as Nam Prabhu, the holy name. This is how he's appeared in this age, because this age is meant to be very fallen. It's Kali Yuga. It's the dark age. It's the materialistic age of hypocrisy and materialism. So, and people basically, if God were to appear, nobody would accept him. They didn't accept Jesus either, even though he was so loving, so merciful. They still, majority, when he was here, only a few people were following him, not many. Now many people are trying to follow him in one way or another. Sentiment's nice. So the Lord appears to establish genuine religion, not man-made ones, not concocted ones, not watered-down ones, but genuine. If you water down a formula, it doesn't work. So the real process has to be, and we have to try to apply those codes. They're relevant to our situation. But the main reason he appears is to reciprocate loving exchange with his devotees or aspiring devotees, and to remove the ignorance, to remove the demoniac mentality which we all tend to be influenced by, and persons who are pushing that, of course, to remove them, as you may remove them in society, in prisons and what have you. Everything's changing, of course, nowadays, because we're giving up the real purpose of life. We make our own rules and think we can get away with it. But there are laws of nature, they're called karmic, infallible laws of nature. You may temporarily be able to sidestep that, but you can't avoid it eventually. So he comes in order to give people this chance, to enliven people and give them the chance. One who knows, is a very beautiful verse, text number 9, one who knows this transcendental nature of God fully and why he appears and his activities and so on, does not need to take birth again, but can go back to God. Knowledge of God, which is so lacking, is very short, very shallow. But when we have a deeper understanding of the nature of Godhead, his transcendental nature, his actual form, his pastimes, etc. So Bhagavad Gita gives us the method where we can slowly become eligible. Realization is called Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmam Susukam Kartam Avyam. It is realized through transcendental senses. It's not something which is just a theory, but it's a realization. And with that realization, one no longer has an interest in trying to pursue a temporary objective in life. You may do for the sake of maintenance, but it's not our goal. Most people's goal is material. But when one has that spiritual realization, you understand the only purpose of human life is to realize that spiritual nature, because that's the solution to all problems. There'll be no wars, there'll be no pestilence, there'll be no exploitation, there'll be no stress or anxiety of the material nature, of nothing. And eventually there'll be no material body to even experience that. But then he gives a little qualification how we have to be freed, being freed from all these attachments and fears and anger and lust and all these things. We have to become free of that. The process is extended and expanded, how we can become free of lust, greed, anger, envy and what have you. Maybe many people wish they could be free of these things, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And in that condition then, with the heart cleared of that, then it's easier to understand the transcendental nature of God. Godhead. Krishna in text number 11 describes, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha, or Arjuna. Everyone's following God's path, yes. It's like in Australia, you may have a few prisons here and there. You're also in the government. You're also maybe forced to follow a certain discipline in the hospital or in the prison house. You're in the prison. You may not be inclined to follow the government per se, but ultimately everything is supposed to be, I'm not saying it is, it's just an example, it's supposed to be managed and organized by the government. They give some free will, of course, to the individuals, but ultimately it's supposed to be under the government's jurisdiction, including the prisons, and so on and so forth. We could say all the roads in Australia are under the government. Everyone is driving on the roads. They're following the roads given by the government. But not everyone's going in the same way. Some are going this way, some that way. Some are breaking the law. Some are doing all kinds of things on the roads. But nonetheless, they are the roads of the government. So in that sense, everyone is inspired by the Lord within according to our desires and karma to act in certain ways. But not everybody is therefore let's say, acting favorably or in relationship with Krishna. Some are, some aren't. So, but everyone's following. He's giving us the faith, the initiative, the passion, the drive to do this and do that, because that's what we want. And he's providing the facilities to do it. The body, the mind, the world around us, etc. It's not ours, it's his. He's giving it to us because we want to enjoy separately from him. So he gives us that facility. Well, we think it's ours, and that's, if you think somebody's property is yours, that's called a criminal behavior. And that's the nature of everyone in this universe. Everyone thinks it's mine when it's not. Temporarily, if you're renting a house, you can say, it's my house, but we know it's not really our house. We're renting it. We're a tenant, we're not the landlord. Krishna's the landlord, we're just a tenant. And if we claim to be the landlord, then that's why we have to suffer in this world. Because it's not. But most people, unfortunately, although everyone surrenders, so you reciprocate. If you want material things, they give you material things. But there's the karma, so you may not get exactly what you want. You have to suffer as well as enjoy. That's how it works in the material duality. And if you want to merge into the impersonal, he can facilitate that too. If we want to love God as a servant, he can facilitate that. A mother, a father, a friend, a lover, all that is by the grace of Krishna, he can facilitate as they surrender unto me. Simple. And then in number 12, he describes how everyone's really, most people are very inclined towards material results, material enjoyment. So in text number 13, he describes a system to accommodate that and at the same time purify us. Chaturvarnya Mayashristam Guna Karma Vibhagash. And according to the three modes, according to our nature, and the work which we're naturally inclined towards, he's given a system of society. A system is there automatically, whether we define it or not. Some people are inclined towards management, some are inclined towards education, some are inclined towards business, and some are inclined just to assist the others work in different capacities. It's there automatically. Doesn't need definition, but there is a proper definition and a system for each of those particular inclinations to follow, which will help everyone of that nature and those under their guidance to progress spiritually. It's called the Varna Ashram system. It includes both the occupation and the order of life. Training in spiritual life was a must for young boys, particularly. The girls would follow, but the young boys would be trained in spiritual purposes as well as their occupational nature. And then they would naturally be equipped for a life of both fulfilling their material duties and their attachments are therein, in a way they can be happy in this life and at the same time progress spiritually. Protective society. Not this wild society we have now of chaos. And then Krishna goes on to describe that, how the wise people, they follow this system which he's giving here. Then he describes a very important point in text number 17 and 18, 19. The nature of action, we discussed it yesterday or somewhere recently. Action, inaction, and forbidden action, or sinful activity. Action, according to that system of Chaturvarnyam or Varnashram, is considered karma. If we act against it, it's called vikarma, which results in a sinful reaction. We saw at the end of last chapter, number 3, Arjuna asked Krishna a question. What is it causing? What does it cause a man to act against his nature, basically? To not follow this system, but to try to imitate others or whatever, just to not act according to one's nature. Krishna said it's lust only. Kama esha, krodha esha. But to perform one's duty according to one's nature is the essential foundation, you could say, of society, of culture, and of spiritual progress for most people who are not transcendental. And he told Arjuna, you have to do it. So to understand, and then our karma is activities which have no reaction, transcendental activities solely and wholly for the pleasure of the Supreme, or activities leading to that point of surrender, of bringing pleasure to the Supreme Lord. It's called Bhakti Yoga, devotional service. So the Lord has appeared in this age in the form of Nama Prabhu, the holy name, because most people are not able to follow this system, practically speaking. Almost everyone is engaged in vikarma, not karma. We call it karma, but it's not karma. It's vikarma, which means a sinful activity which has a sinful reaction. Any activity, in fact, in the 3rd chapter, Krishna describes that anything we do, if it's not offered as a sacrifice to the Lord of sacrifice, then it's a sinful reaction. It's considered a sin. Pretty much everything we do, it comes into that bracket. Therefore he's appeared in this age of Nam Prabhu, Kalikalera Nam, Namarupa Krishna Avatar, the Namarupa, the form of the Lord as Krishna Avatar is the Nam, the name. He's appeared for everyone, no matter whether sinful, unsinful, whatever we call ourselves, or whatever we are. We call ourselves isn't necessarily what we are. But whatever it is, we take shelter of Nam, the holy name of Krishna. This can lift us up, bring us to the spiritual consciousness once cultivate this chanting of the holy names, purification of our consciousness. This is the Yuga Dharma, it's the Dharma for this age of Kali. Krishna has appeared to establish the Dharma. The Dharma is, in this age of Kali, is Sankirtan. Yogya Sankirtanam prayer, Yajantihi Sumedasha. In Kali Yuga, the Sankirtan Yogya, the chanting of the holy name, is the Dharma, or the religious practice for this age. Simple as that. There is no other ultimately successful process. But nonetheless, being situated more congenially to our nature is very helpful. Then he goes on to explain various ways where people become transcendental. We're going to run forward quickly. There's only 2 or 3 minutes left. And right towards the end of this chapter, there's a very significant catch point. He gives all these methods of transcending austerities, practicing various yogas, studying the scriptures, acting very piously in the mode of goodness, and so on and so forth. Practicing brahmacharya, celibacy, all different processes people adopt to try to transcend or to try to advance to the spiritual platform. But as and until, if they're still based on any self-centered concept like I want, or for me, etc., they remain within the bracket of materialistic endeavor. It's only the transformation to spiritual practice comes, and in text number 34, Krishna explains the secret. If you go to 34, if you're following at all, Krishna says, Tadvidi panipatini pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tatvadarshina. perhaps the key verse of this chapter. He says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Seeing the truth and hearing about it. Hearing about it is one thing, but seeing it is another. You may hear about the beauty of some place, wherever it is, but to actually see it is another thing. You can actually experience it and share that experience. Not just talk about it, but share it. So sharing that experience, it helps to awaken within us that desire to also experience that. Krishna talks about in the second chapter, it's called Pramvrishva Navartate. To experience that higher taste, one becomes fixed in consciousness. We may have some desire, for whatever reason, to approach it, but to actually experience is the conviction. To experience that higher taste. Then one's not interested in the lower taste of the material world. Nothing can disturb such a soul. Because that knowledge, not just knowledge, Krishna said, one who applies himself to this knowledge realizes it in due course of time. And this knowledge helps to free, even if we're most sinful. When we're situated on this boat of transcendental knowledge, one can easily cross over this material ocean of miseries. And because it burns to ashes, all the fire, with the fire of knowledge, it burns to ashes all these reactions, good or bad, to material activities. Cleanses our heart. It's practicing this transcendental knowledge. There's nothing, Krishna says, as sublime and pure as this knowledge. It is the fruit of all mysticism, mature fruit. One who has achieved this knowledge or realized it in due course of time, he can realize the self within. We can realize our actual spiritual existence, full bliss, eternity and knowledge. So that's the process. Unfortunately, most people don't want to take to the process, and they rather stay and rot in this material world, basically. Worms in store, they don't want to get out, even if you try to help them out. That's their home. They consider that my home. This is not our home. The material world is not our home. It's a foreign place for the soul, and that's why we suffer. If it was our home, we wouldn't suffer. We wouldn't be controlled. But we are. This is an abnormal situation for the eternal soul, who's eternally looking for Ananda, Chit knowledge, bliss knowledge, and eternal, Nitya, eternal life. But we find temporary life, we find misery, and we don't find knowledge, ignorance, mostly ignorance. So that's just a quick summary of this chapter, the fourth chapter, of the importance of taking guidance. If we want to transcend, then we must all take guidance from self-realized souls. Hare Krishna. And we'll finish there. It's 7 o'clock, where the Pujari is ready to blow the conch shell. There he goes. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Is there anyone else here? Yep, there.